Rain fell in slow motion against the glass window of Arav's apartment, tracing crooked lines across the world he no longer recognized. He sat in silence, the hum of the city outside barely reaching his ears. The room was dim, a single lamp flickering beside an old camera resting on his desk. That camera had once captured her smile, and now it sat like a relic of a past he could never return to. Arav was a photographer, not the kind who chased glamour or fame. He believed that a photograph wasn't about perfection. It was about truth. But ever since Mira left, or rather, since she chose someone else, truth had become unbearable. He picked up the photo frame lying face down on his desk. The glass was cracked, a thin line slicing through Myra's face. Her eyes, even through the fracture, looked alive, bright, full of dreams. She had been his muse, his light. And now every memory of her burned. He had tried to move on. God knows he tried. But every corner of the city whispered her name. The coffee shop where she'd laughed too loud. The street light under which she once kissed him goodnight. Even the rain. She used to say, "Rain made the world more honest." But honesty had been a lie. He discovered the truth 2 months after she left him. A mutual friend had mentioned Mira's new job at Rohan's company. Rohan, Arav's closest friend. The same man who had once toasted to their love. Stood beside him in every celebration and promised, "You and Mira are meant to last forever." The betrayal didn't come with a knife. It came quietly through late-night messages, hidden laughter, and the way Myra's eyes stopped searching for Arav in a crowd. When he finally confronted Rohan, there were no denials. Just silence and a look that said, "I'm sorry, but she chose me." That night, Arav walked aimlessly through the city until dawn. By morning, something inside him had changed. The ache that once begged for healing turned into something sharper. Something darker. It wasn't about wanting her back anymore. It was about making them feel what he felt. He began collecting pieces, fragments of a plan. Revenge wasn't loud. It was patient. It was art. And Arav had always been an artist. Days turned into weeks. He watched them from afar, Rohan and Mira smiling in cafes, walking hand in hand through the same streets he once walked with her. His hands would tremble, not from weakness, but from the storm that brewed inside him. He started documenting them secretly. Photos, videos, every stolen moment captured through his lens. He wasn't even sure why he was doing it at first. Maybe to prove they were real. Maybe to destroy them later. But then, one evening, something unexpected happened. He was following them near the old pier when Mira turned around suddenly as if sensing him. Her eyes met his across the distance. For a moment, time stopped. The wind carried strands of her hair across her face, and her lips parted, not in guilt, not in surprise, but in something else. Something unreadable. Then she turned back, slipped her hand into Rohan's, and walked away. Arav stood frozen, the camera still in his hand. In that instant, he realized she knew he was watching. And she didn't care. That night, he developed the photos in his darkroom. The red light filled the small space, and as her image surfaced on the paper, he whispered under his breath, "Greater than you'll see what you did to me. One picture at a time." Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, drowning his voice. And so it began, not with a scream. Not with violence, but with a single photograph. The first in a series that would become his quiet war. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving behind a quiet city washed in gray. Arav hadn't slept. The photographs hung across his darkroom like ghosts Mira's face. Rohan's arm around her, their smiles under streetlights. Each print whispered something cruel, something that sliced at the inside of his chest. He stood before them, camera in hand, staring like a man trying to read his own death sentence. Revenge, he told himself, was not about rage. It was about precision. And patience was something he had mastered behind a lens. That morning, he deleted every old message from Mira, every memory stored in his phone. Then he took out a new notebook, black cover, no name, and wrote 3 words on the first page: "Greater than they will fall." That became his new mantra. Arav spent the next few weeks quietly building his new identity. He stopped taking photography clients instead. He began doing freelance editing for corporate firms. The irony didn't escape him. Rohan's company often outsourced editing work. All it took was a fake name, Arnav Khanna, and a new email address. 3 days later, the first project came in, a set of promotional photographs from Rohan Verma Studios. Arav laughed, not loudly, not manically, but the kind of laugh that comes from disbelief. Fate had just handed him the first thread of the web. He edited the files perfectly, like a ghost working in the background. But between layers of images, he began inserting subtle distortions, barely noticeable glints of shadow, blurred reflections, something off in the lighting, just enough to make the pictures feel ... wrong. When Mira's image appeared in one of the shoots, smiling beside Rohan, wearing that same soft pink scarf he once gifted her, Arav's hands trembled. He zoomed into her eyes on the screen. For a moment, he thought he saw sadness there. But maybe that was just his wishful thinking. He tilted his head, whispered under his breath, "Greater than you look perfect in guilt." Weeks turned into a pattern of quiet nights and colder mornings. Arav rarely stepped outside anymore. He lived through his lens and through his plans. The city continued as usual, people moving, laughing, living while he drifted like a shadow among them. One evening he received a message from Mira, a simple one. "Mira, Arav, can we talk?" He stared at it for a long time before replying. His first instinct was to ignore it. But curiosity, that old poison one, Arav? About what? "Mira, I think I owe you an explanation." He hesitated, then typed, "Greater than tomorrow. Saul Lodan, Old Cafe on Baker Street." His fingers hovered above the keyboard for a second longer, then pressed send. The cafe hadn't changed, the same yellow lights, the same smell of roasted beans and rain-damp wood. But everything felt hollow. Arav arrived early, sat in the farthest corner facing the door. His camera rested beside him, silent but loaded. When Mira walked in, the world seemed to pause. She looked older, or maybe just tired. Her eyes searched the cafe until they found him. For a second she hesitated, then walked over, each step echoing in his mind like a memory he couldn't erase. She sat across from him, her hands trembling around a cup she hadn't ordered yet. "Greater than you look." "Different," she said softly. "Greater than so do you," Arav replied, his tone sharp but even. "Guess betrayal does that to people?" Her eyes fell. "Greater than Arav. I didn't mean for things to happen like that." "You meant for something to happen, though," he said. "Let's not pretend otherwise." There was a silence, long and suffocating. Finally, she said, "Greater than I loved you, Arav. I did. But you started fading. Photography became your only world. I was lonely." He leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. "Greater than, and you found comfort in my best friend." "It wasn't planned," she whispered. "It just greater than happened." He cut in bitterly. "Yeah, love just happens. Lies just happen. And pain just keeps happening." Her eyes glistened, but he didn't look away. "Greater than I didn't come here to fight," she said quietly. "I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. I wanted to end things peacefully." He almost smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Greater than peacefully," he echoed. "You burned my peace, Mira. You buried it with every lie you told." Her eyes welled up. "I still care about you." He leaned closer, voice low. "Greater than, then pray I find peace. Because when I do, someone will pay for it." For a brief second, fear flickered in her eyes, and he saw it. That was the moment he knew his plan was working. After she left, Arav stayed in the cafe, sipping cold coffee and replaying every word in his head. He wasn't satisfied. He needed more. He wanted Rohan to feel that same fear, the same slow dread of losing everything. He began to set traps, not physical, but emotional ones. First, he anonymously leaked some of Rohan's company's edited images online with slight manipulations that hinted at plagiarism. Then, he started sending Rohan mysterious emails from an unknown sender, Images of Mira and him shot from angles they never noticed. Greater than, do you trust her as much as she trusts you? Each email carried that same line. Within weeks, whispers began spreading inside Rohan's company. Someone was sabotaging him from the shadows. Rohan grew paranoid. Mira noticed, of course, and tension began to creep between them. Arav watched it all unfold through his camera lens. Hidden across streets reflected in mirrors. Captured in pixels. He was winning. But strangely, the more he hurt them, the emptier he felt. Some nights, he would wake up drenched in sweat, Mira's voice echoing in his head the way she said, "I still care about you." Was that pity or guilt? He couldn't tell anymore. One night, he looked at himself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the man staring back. The bags under his eyes, the pale skin, the faint stubble, he looked like a stranger wearing his face. "Who are you now?" he whispered. The mirror offered no answer. Only the faint reflection of a man who had replaced love with obsession. A few days later, Rohan called him greater than Arav. He said, voice tense, "Can we meet? It's urgent." "Why?" Arav asked calmly. "It's about Mira. She's been acting strange. And someone's been sending me photos. I thought maybe you knew something." For a moment, Arav almost admired Rohan's audacity, the courage to ask the man he'd betrayed for help. "Greater than sure," Arav said. "Let's talk." They met at a small rooftop bar overlooking the city. The air was heavy with humidity and the faint hum of neon lights. Rohan looked exhausted, sleepless eyes, messy hair. The posture of a man cracking under pressure. "Greater than, I know you're angry," Rohan began, "and you have every right to be. But someone's trying to mess with us. I don't know who." Arav sipped his drink, pretending to think. "Greater than, that's rough. Maybe karma has good timing." Rohan sighed. "Greater than, look, Arav. I never wanted to hurt you. Mira and I, we didn't plan anything. It just happened." "That line again," Arav said, his voice soft but sharp. "It just happened. You both sound rehearsed." Rohan looked up, guilt flashing in his eyes. "You've changed," he said quietly. "You used to be kind." Arav smiled faintly. "Greater than kindness is a luxury, Rohan. I gave it to people who didn't deserve it." "Hey." They sat in silence for a while. Then Rohan said something unexpected. "Greater than, you still love her, don't you?" Arav didn't answer because silence was louder than truth. Later that night, Arav returned home, sat in front of his wall of photographs, and stared at them until the lines blurred. He had achieved what he wanted, cracks in their perfect world. But instead of satisfaction, he felt something worse. HOLLOWNESS. The camera sat on his lap. He lifted it slowly, pointed the lens at his reflection in the dark window, and pressed the shutter. Click. The flash lit up the room for an instant, and in that light, he saw what he had become, a man haunted not by betrayal, but by his own vengeance. He whispered into the quiet air, "Greater than, I thought I was punishing them. But it's me who's disappearing." Outside, the wind howled again, carrying the faint echo of Mira's name. The days blurred together after that rooftop meeting. Arav no longer marked time by calendars or clocks, only by the rhythm of his obsession. Sleep came in fragments, dreams in broken pieces. Sometimes he'd dream of Myra laughing under sunlight, only for her face to twist into Rohan's reflection when he woke. He was living two lives now, one in the daylight, where he pretended to be ordinary, and one in the dark, where he crafted vengeance like art. But even art demands a price. Arav's first real slip came one Thursday morning. He was tailing Mira on her way to work when she suddenly turned around again, just like the night at the pier. Her eyes locked onto him across the crowd, and this time, she didn't look away. She walked straight toward him. "Greater than Arav," she said, her voice steady but trembling at the edges. "Why are you following me?" He tried to keep his face calm. "Greater than, I wasn't." "Don't lie," she said, almost pleading. "You've been everywhere. I see you near the office, at the cafe, even outside our building. What do you want from us?" He hesitated because for a split second, he didn't know the answer himself. Greater than closure, he finally said, "You took something from me, Mira. I just want it back." Her eyes filled with tears. "Greater than we made mistakes are off. But this isn't you. You're scaring me." He almost wanted to stop. Almost. But then Rohan's name crossed her lips, and the flicker of hesitation burned away. "Greater than you'll know fear soon enough," he said coldly, and walked away. That was the moment Mira understood it wasn't guilt driving him anymore. Something darker. And that was the moment Arav lost the last bit of the man he used to be. That night, his apartment was filled with cigarette smoke and scattered photographs. He stared at his wall, a chaotic collage of Myra and Rohan. Dates, locations, newspaper clippings, and his own scribbled notes. It looked less like a revenge plan now. He didn't notice how pale he'd grown, how hollow his eyes had become. He didn't see how revenge had wrapped around his heart like vines, suffocating everything else. All he saw was them laughing, smiling, living while he drowned in the aftermath of their betrayal. He started making recordings, talking to himself late into the night, documenting every emotion like a diary of decay. Greater than they think they've moved on. He said into the recorder one night, his voice hoarse, "But you can't bury what you broke. You can't erase guilt. I'll be their ghost until they crumble." He paused, breathing heavily. Then, softer, almost a whisper, "Greater than Mira, do you ever dream of me?" A few days later, his plan took a crueler turn. He anonymously sent Rohan a USB drive. Inside were photos, real ones, of Mira meeting another man at a restaurant. It was innocent. Just a work meeting. But Arav had edited the pictures, changed the angles, and added subtle touches that made them look intimate. He didn't want to hurt Mira physically. No, his revenge was more poetic. He wanted her to feel the same pain she once made him feel. The doubt. The sleepless nights, the erosion of trust, and it worked. Within days, the tension between Mira and Rohan exploded. Arguments, jealousy, accusations. Arav watched it all unfold from afar. But something unexpected happened. Rohan showed up at Arav's apartment one evening. Drenched in rain, eyes red from sleeplessness. "You win," he said bitterly. "You wanted to destroy us. You did? Are you happy now?" Arav didn't move. He stood silently, watching his former friend fall apart. "Greater than she thinks I cheated," Rohan said. "I didn't, but she doesn't believe me." You did this, didn't you?" Arav said nothing. "Greater than you know what's funny," Rohan whispered. "Even now, after everything, she defends you. She says you're just lost." That struck something deep in Arav. He wanted to feel satisfaction, but instead, he felt something else, something sharp and hollow. Rohan turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "Greater than whatever you're looking for, Arav. You won't find it in ruining people. You'll only find ashes." And then he was gone, that night. Arav couldn't stop replaying Rohan's words, "ashes." He looked around his apartment, the photos, the cigarette butts, the bottles. It was ashes. His entire life had burned down to one thing, revenge. And yet, he couldn't stop. He decided to push further, one final blow that would end it all. He hacked into Rohan's work system using the company credentials he'd gathered. He planned to leak private data, frame Rohan for corporate fraud, and watch his empire collapse. It wasn't about justice anymore. It was about power, control, the kind Mira had taken from him when she walked away. The night he uploaded the files, thunder roared outside. He watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. And as it reached 100%, he whispered, "Greater than goodbye." Rohan, he didn't realize Mira was standing behind him. She had come to his apartment desperate, frightened, searching for answers. The door had been slightly open, the light from the computer glowing in the darkness. "Greater than Arav," she said softly. He turned, startled, eyes wide. "What are you doing here?" "Stopping you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Please, don't do this. You don't get to tell me what to do anymore. You're destroying yourself," she said. voice trembling. You think this will make you whole? It won't. It'll just leave you empty. He laughed bitterly. Greater than empty. I've been empty since the day you left. She stepped closer, her voice breaking. Greater than I was wrong, Arav. I hurt you. But this monster you're becoming, it's not you. He clenched his fists. Greater than don't pretend to care. I do care, she cried. I always did. But I can't love the ghost of who you were. Her words hit him harder than any slap. He wanted to scream, to break something, to make her hurt like he did. But instead, his voice came out quiet, trembling. Greater than then, tell me, Mira. Why did you do it? Why him? She hesitated, then whispered, Greater than because I was afraid. You loved too deeply. It scared me. I thought if I ran, it would make life easier. But I was wrong. Silence filled the room, heavy, suffocating. The computer screen behind him still glowed, showing the completed upload. The damage was done. Arav looked at her, the woman he once loved, the reason he'd lost everything. And for the first time, he saw her not as the betrayer, but as another broken soul. He sank to his knees, hands covering his face. I don't know who I am anymore, he whispered. Myra knelt beside him. Her voice soft. Greater than stop, please. Before there's nothing left to save. But it was too late. A notification blinked on the screen. Email sent successfully. Rohan's company would wake up to chaos by morning. Arav stared at the screen. Then at Mira, realization dawning slowly. Greater than it's over, he said quietly. Greater than no, she whispered. It's just begun. The next morning, the news spread everywhere. Rohan Verma under investigation for corporate fraud. His reputation shattered overnight. Mira disappeared from social media, unreachable. Arav watched the headlines, feeling nothing. No victory. No relief. Just silence. He'd won the war but lost the only parts of himself that ever mattered that night. He took out his camera one last time. He looked through the lens, not at others, but at himself. The man staring back wasn't Arav anymore. He was just the echo of a love that turned to poison. He pressed the shutter dot, click dot, the final photograph. The end of his story. Or maybe the beginning of his punishment. Morning came like a punishment. Arav woke to the sound of his phone buzzing endlessly. Notifications, messages, missed calls, his screen overflowed with chaos. The news had exploded overnight. Rohan Verma accused of fraud and data manipulation. Verma Studios faces legal scrutiny. Every headline carried the weight of his actions. He had done it. He had destroyed Rohan, but instead of triumph, sick emptiness coiled inside him. He walked to his window, pulling aside the curtains. The city looked the same, indifferent, alive, but inside his apartment, everything was dead. The photographs, the notes, the broken camera lens, all of it felt meaningless now. For the first time, Arav saw what he had become, a man who mistook destruction for closure, and then came the knock. 3 sharp. Deliberate knocks. He froze. Through the peephole, 2 men in plain clothes stood outside, badges glinting under the hallway light. His pulse quickened. Greater than Mr. Arav Mehta. One of them called. Yes, Arav replied slowly. We'd like to ask you some questions. It's about the Verma case. They entered calmly, searching his apartment. One officer picked up a flash drive from the table. Greater than mind telling us what's on this. Arav didn't answer. His throat felt dry. Greater than we traced an anonymous upload back to your IP, the officer continued. We just need to confirm a few things. He wanted to lie, to deny everything, but exhaustion drowned every instinct. For the first time, Arav didn't want to fight back. He just wanted it all to end. At the station, the questions came in waves about Rohan, about the files, about his connection to Mira. Arav spoke little. He admitted to the upload, but refused to explain why. Revenge doesn't sound good on paper. He told himself silently. By evening, they released him temporarily, pending investigation. The officer handed him a notice. Greater than you'll need to appear in court next week. Don't leave the city. He nodded, numb, duh. As he stepped outside, the world felt colder. The sky was a dull gray, like even the sun couldn't bear to look at him. That night, Arav tried to call Mira. No answer. He sent messages, nothing. Her silence was heavier than any prison could be. He searched online, no posts, no updates. It was as if she had vanished completely. Rohan, on the other hand, was everywhere. His downfall broadcast across headlines and TV screens. The man who once smiled from magazine covers now looked like a ghost himself, surrounded by cameras and questions he couldn't answer. Arav should have felt satisfaction. Instead, guilt began to seep in, slow but relentless. He remembered Mira's voice that night. "You're destroying yourself." And she had been right. He poured himself a drink, the third that evening, and stared at the cracked photograph of them from years ago. Her face, his arm around her. It's a smile that once made life feel worth living. He lifted the frame and whispered, "Greater than you won. You both won. Because you made me you." The glass cracked further as his grip tightened. Days passed in a blur. Arav stopped eating, stopped answering calls. The investigation deepened. Evidence piled against him, digital trails, access logs, the USB drive. He could already see where this was headed. Prison. Isolation. Maybe that was what he deserved. But then, one night, there was a letter. It had no name. Just his address written in neat handwriting. Inside was a single page. "Greater than Arav, I'm leaving the city. I can't stay here anymore. Everything fell apart. Rohan, me, everything. I wanted you to stop, but I see now you can't. You become what pain made you. I hope one day you find the peace we both lost." Mira, no signature. No goodbye. Just that one line that echoed in his head again and again. "Greater than you've become what pain made you." He folded the letter carefully, almost reverently, and placed it beside his camera. That night, he dreamed of the past the day he first met her. Flashback 4 years earlier. Was a college exhibition, Arav's first public display of his photography. Rows of his black and white portraits lined the walls. He'd been nervous, fidgeting, unsure if his art meant anything to anyone. And then she walked in, Mira, in a yellow dress, eyes full of curiosity. She stopped in front of one photo, a homeless child laughing in the rain. "Greater than you captured more than a smile," she had said. "You captured freedom." He'd laughed shyly. "You see more than most people. Maybe that's why I'm here," she'd replied. That conversation had lasted hours. By the end of the evening, he knew she wasn't just another face in the crowd. She was the photograph he had been trying to take his whole life. He woke up crying for the first time in years. The tears weren't about betrayal, they were about loss. Real, irreversible loss. He realized that he didn't hate Myra anymore. He hated the version of himself that couldn't forgive. But forgiveness comes too late when you've already burned the bridges. The next morning, Arav received a call from Rohan. He almost didn't answer. But curiosity, that old ghost, won again. Greater than Arav, Rohan's voice was weak. "Tired? Why are you calling me?" "Because it's over. I'm leaving the country. The company's finished. Everything's gone." "Good," Arav said bitterly. "Not good. Myra's gone too." Arav froze. "What do you mean, gone?" "She left. No one knows where. She didn't even say goodbye." A long silence followed. Then Rohan said something Arav would never forget. "Greater than you wanted revenge, Arav. You got it. But what's left of you now?" The line went dead that night. Arav walked through the city aimlessly. The same streets that once echoed with Myra's laughter. The neon lights blurred into streaks of red and white as he passed by cafes, parks, corners, all the places they once belonged to. He reached the old pier, the place where she had first caught him watching her. The waves crashed against the wooden planks. Cold wind cutting through his jacket. He sat there for hours, staring at the black water. His reflection trembled on the surface, like even the sea couldn't hold his shape anymore. He thought about what Rohan said, what Mira wrote, and for the first time, he admitted it. He wasn't seeking revenge anymore. He was searching for himself in the ruins of their love. But there was nothing left to find. Arav stood up slowly and walked toward the edge of the pier. The wind howled around him, carrying the faint smell of rain. He closed his eyes. "Mira," he whispered, "if you ever see me again, know that I never stopped loving you. I just forgot how to love without pain." He took the camera from his bag, aimed it at the horizon, and pressed the shutter one last time. Click, a single flash illuminated his face, tired, broken but peaceful for the first time in years. He placed the camera gently on the wooden railing, next to the letter she'd written, and walked away into the fog. The waves swallowed the sound of his footsteps. Days later, a fisherman found the camera. Inside, there was only one photograph, the sea, endless and gray, stretching into the mist, and beneath it, scribbled in shaky handwriting on a scrap of paper, "Revenge is just love that forgot how to breathe." 5 years later, the city had changed. Buildings taller, streets brighter, faces younger, but time had done little to heal Mira. She sat by the window of her small studio apartment, staring at the fading skyline. On her table lay a single photograph, the last one Riv ever took. The sea, endless and gray. She still didn't know how it had reached her. Only that one morning an envelope arrived. No name, no address, just that photo inside and on the back. A single sentence. "Greater than for the part of me that still remembers you." Mira touched the corner of the photo gently, as if it might disappear. Sometimes she wondered if Arav was still alive. No one ever found him. The police called it a disappearance. Rohan said he must have run away. But Mira, she knew better. He hadn't run. He had let go. Mira worked now as an art teacher at a small community school. She spent her days surrounded by children's laughter, their paint-smeared fingers and innocent dreams. It was her only solace, the one place where pain couldn't follow her. But even there, sometimes she'd see a boy holding a camera, or a girl laughing under the rain, and her chest would tighten until she could barely breathe. One afternoon, as she was cleaning up the classroom, a small boy came running to her, holding a drawing. "Greater than Miss Mira, I drew this for you." She smiled and took it. The drawing showed a girl standing by the sea, and above her, written in clumsy handwriting, "Greater than she's waiting for someone." Mira's eyes blurred. She crouched down and hugged him gently. "Greater than it's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you." The boy grinned. "Who's she waiting for?" Mira smiled faintly. "Someone she always remember." That night, as rain pattered against her window, Mira sat with a cup of tea, staring at the photograph again. Every drop of rain outside reminded her of that night. Years ago, when she'd begged Arav to stop, when she'd seen in his eyes not hatred for Rohan, but a kind of grief that had no end, she whispered to the empty room, "Greater than you were right, Arav. Pain doesn't disappear. It just changes shape." The sound of thunder rolled in the distance, and for a brief moment, she thought she heard his voice, soft, distant, carried by the storm. And love doesn't die. It just hides. She closed her eyes and let the tears fall. 2 months later, the gallery was quiet. Mira hadn't been to one in years. But tonight was special. The city photographer's memorial exhibition, dedicated to artists who had left behind work that spoke beyond their years. As she walked through the rows of photographs, she froze. There, hanging on the central wall, was his name, Arav Mehta Final Works. Her heart pounded as she approached. The photo displayed was the same one she had, the gray sea, the mist. But beside it were 3 more. Ones she had never seen before. One, a blurred image of a girl turning away from the camera. 2, a close-up of hands letting sand fall through fingers. 3, and the last 2 shadows, walking in opposite directions, fading into light. Underneath the 3rd photo, there was a small handwritten note displayed behind the glass. "Greater than. Forgiveness is not about freeing the one who hurt you. It's about freeing yourself from the version of you that still bleeds." Arav Mira's knees almost gave out. The curator noticed her trembling and approached softly, Greater than you knew him. Yes, she whispered. Once he left these photos anonymously, the curator said. They were mailed to the gallery a few years ago. No one knows from where. But they're hauntingly beautiful, aren't they? Mira nodded, unable to speak. Her fingers brushed the edge of the frame. Tracing his handwriting, it felt like touching his soul. Later that night, she walked back to the pier, their pier. The same wooden planks. The same cold wind, though the world felt older now. She sat on the railing, watching the water ripple under the moonlight. The sea hadn't changed, only she had. She took a small envelope from her coat. Inside was the letter she had written to Arav years ago, but never sent. She read it aloud softly, her voice trembling in the night air. Arav, you once told me that love was a photograph. It captures what words can't. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. Love isn't about holding on. It's about remembering, even when remembering hurts. If you're still out there, know that I forgive you, not because you asked me to, but because I can't keep hating the only person who ever saw me completely. Voice broke. The waves seemed to answer her, crashing softly against the pier. She folded the letter, tied it to a small white flower, and let it drift into the sea as it floated away. She whispered, greater than rest now. Arav, you've taken enough pain with you. 5 years later, a different Shorey, photographer in another city, set up his display for an art fair. Among his photos was one that always drew attention, the sea, endless and gray, with a faint silhouette of a man walking into the mist. When people asked about it, he would smile faintly and say, greater than that one came to me in the mail. No sender, no story. But I like to believe it's about finding peace. He didn't know that somewhere. Across the same ocean, a woman sat by her window every night, whispering to the sea, and sometimes, only sometimes, when the wind was right. She could swear she heard a camera click in the distance. Epilogue years later. Mira published a small book, Ashes of Her Name. It wasn't about Arav or Rohan by name, but every page breathed their shadows. It spoke of love turned to fire, and forgiveness born from ruin. The final page read, greater than he loved me, like a storm, fierce, beautiful, and impossible to hold. I survived, but a part of me still waits for the rain. And somewhere, perhaps in another life, Arav smiled. Because even if love couldn't save them, it had immortalized them. In the end, revenge had burned everything but from its ashes. Something eternal remained, a photograph, a whisper, a name.